Thank you for joining us this evening. So I'm going to be talking about Pueblo Grande de Nevada, the Lost City pageant that happened out at St. Thomas, and the Civilian Conservation Corps. So to start, since we do have a few people that are not from out here, the area we're talking about is this circled, or this area right here where it says Main Ridge and Pueblo Grande de, and it got cut off. It's supposed to be Pueblo Grande de Nevada. And then St. Thomas, and then the Lost City Museum is right here, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. So as far as looking at the river and Lake Mead, so this is the Overton arm of Lake Mead. This was taken from in 2000, and so this is the Virgin River and then the Muddy River right here. And so the area we're talking about is this area that's I'm trying to circle with my cursor. All right. So the area with Moapa Valley and that region had been known to have Native American groups in there since about 1827, when explorer Jedediah Smith wrote a letter to General William Clark, who was the superintendent of Indian Affairs. He was talking about the number of Paulchis, which was the Paiute, and he received marble knives, or flint pipes, and a knife of flint as well. And then he was shown the salt caves that are on the lower Virgin River, and then there are salt caves as well within the Lake Mead boundary. But it wasn't until the 1920s when Governor Scrugham, who is pictured on the right here, sent out a call for archaeological sites in southern Nevada, because 1920s Las Vegas is not the Las Vegas that you know today, or even a few years ago. It was not really much of a town at all. So they're trying to bring tourism in here. So 1924, John and Fay Perkins reached out to Governor Scrugham to say that there were Puebloan ruins down in the Moapa Valley, and that they should be looked at. So Governor Scrugham reached out to Mark Harrington, who, this is an older picture of him in 1924, to send him down to take a look and see if this was accurate. And so when Mark Harrington goes down with John and Fay, he's finding pottery sherds on the ground, and he's picking them up, and both John and Fay are like, "Oh, don't worry about those. We'll show you where better stuff is located." And they come across, decent sized sites with larger pottery sherds, and it's a huge area with multiple pueblos. And so it was ultimately named Pueblo Grande de Nevada. And these are known to be the furthest west of the Puebloan people. So the people that you might have heard termed Anasazi in the past that we now call Puebloan. And what an interesting and funny aside with that is, sometime in the 1920s, Mark Harrington took these sherds to a fellow archaeologist in New Mexico, who basically said, "Oh no, there are no Puebloan ruins that far west," and threw the sherds in the trash, and basically said Harrington was completely wrong. Well, Harrington took those sherds out of the trash and came on back to Moapa Valley and started excavations. And what he found was this really big complex of sites. So this right here is a picture of Fay Perkins pointing out down here one of the foundations of the Pueblos. And one of the big things with Mark Harrington, actually, let me back up here. So this is after some excavation. This is a Pueblo site, had double walls here, which would help with temperature control. Also looks like there would have been like a hearth type area right here. And then that's Harrington standing on the side there. But with this site, it got picked up by the media, and as the media likes to do, it was sensationalized. It went to newspapers across the country, as far as Seward, Alaska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and as far to the east as like Connecticut and New York. They were describing it as Chicago was built in Nevada. Some said 2,000 years. This one in the middle, this article says 1,500 years ago, which is probably more closer to the actual date of the site. So one of the things with this site, to bring a lot more attention to it, they hosted a pageant in the town of St. Thomas, which is now a ghost town that you can visit if you go to Lake Mead. And they created this. They built pueblos and rerouted trains to bring people in. Roughly, I think it was around 12,000 people showed up for the 1925 pageant, which incidentally actually was the 99th anniversary of that. It was yesterday on the May 23rd and 24th. So this is Mark Harrington in front of the pueblos there that were built. These are Zuni tribal folks who were building the pueblos for the pageant and getting that ready. And then this was the old original museum. It's like basically a single room was devoted to the museum itself, but they needed a place for those artifacts. But one of the really cool things that they did with this to really draw attention to this event, this lost city of Nevada, which is how we got our name, was build a railroad stop at St. Thomas. And so this right here is the very basic stop. You can see the little building here, and then on this one, the line of cars that are taking people out to St. Thomas for the pageant. And then, like I said, this pageant was roughly 12,000 people. It was put on by the LDS Church. That was basically a history of man. So starting with the early settlers here and then up through Mormon settlement at St. Thomas, which had occurred at the later 1800s. And this one is actually one of my favorite pictures, knowing that it's from 1925, 1930, how crisp it is. I believe this is Mark Harrington. This is the governor, and I believe this is a person that worked with Mark Harrington quite a bit, by the man by the name of Willis Evans, who was a member of the Pitt River tribe out of California. But what makes this one of my favorite photos is the kid here that obviously did not get the memo that he was supposed to stay still. And so you can't really see his face at all because he moved during this photo, because at that point, you would have to stay still for a good long bit. So these are members of the Zuni tribe. They, like I said, they built the pueblos out there for this, but they also were dancers as part of this. And we've got a film clip here in just a few slides to show you some of that. But this is the whole stage area. You can see down here in this bottom photo, cows, a covered wagon, that kind of thing. Director, I'm not sure who the director was, overlooking the entire production. And then the Lost City Ranch, which was that first museum. And then these photos that I'm showing you are actually some that we didn't realize we had until last year. And so this was really cool for us to be able to see these. And you can see how they did, somebody's up on maybe filming, because we know there was film footage of this. And then with Nevada up on the ridge in the background. And then the whole group here, they had also members of the Moapa Paiute that had participated. and as well as another individual that I want to talk about here in just a second. So also one of my favorite photos is this one here of this little kid with the bow and arrow. I've got a couple of him with this one, him learning or somebody showing him how to hold it. Um, and then again here, and then one of my coworkers had pointed this out that I had not noticed, but the people poking out of the Pueblo on the side here. But these were all part of those photos that we had no idea that we had. We're not sure if these folks on horseback are local people or if they were actors in the pageant or what. We do know that a couple of Hollywood an actor and an actress had come out for this as well, though I don't think anybody's really ever been able to find the names of those folks. Now, the one that I really was really awesome to find was this picture here. So this is a gentleman. He's sitting on a rabbit fur blanket. And this is a guy by the name of George Evans. George Evans was also a member of the pageant, and he was the father of Willis Evans, who, like I mentioned, Willis Evans worked a lot with Mark Harrington. As an archaeologist, Mark Harrington actually sent him to school for archaeology. He came back when we talk about, in just a second, talk about the CCC a little bit. He was foreman of those groups, of those excavations, worked for the Park Service, did actually excavations at the sites that we have at the museum that are on the property. So he was very well versed in archaeology, and this was his father that was there, in which we didn't realize. He was misidentified in a photo as being his brother, and then one of the family members like, nope, that's his dad, that's his father. So I was like, oh, well, that's really, really cool to know. So, and these are a couple of photos, all part of the pageant. Willis is showing how to hold an atlatl, which was a hunting tool, and then the spear on that and up on a rock face. All right, and so this next bit is it's about a 3-minute silent film of the pageant. Hopefully this will play. There we go. So it starts, with this area, and you realize exactly how big this area is when you can see like tiny people on the cliff sides there. So these are Zuni dancers that were hired to dance for this pageant. And these, I think, are likely going to be, these are Paiute, the local Moapa Paiute that were brought in as well. All right. So all of that being said, with the pageant and the early excavations in the 1920s, with a new project starting in like the late 1920s, early 1930s with the Hoover Dam. And so with the building of that dam, they knew that there were going to be sites that were going to be completely covered and underwater. So the dam construction started in 1931. And then by 1933, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal program, because of the Great Depression, had really come into effect. So that created the Civilian Conservation Corps. And they came into Nevada. They were working on the dam, but they also were hired. Two companies were brought out, Ohio Company 573 and then Company 974 were brought in to do excavations at Pueblo Grande de Nevada and through that area. And they're also the ones who built the museum. So the CCC folks, they moved a lot of dirt for this. Some of the sites were under like up to 10 feet of sand. So that is all sand right there with the Pueblo Foundation at the base of that. And here are just some of the CCC folks as they're doing some of these excavations, or in the case of the top photograph, posing for a picture. Again, so this one, Harrington is not in this, but this is Willis right here. And then Faye Perkins right here, because Faye Perkins, who, if you remember, was the person who, him and his brother showed Harrington where the sites were. Harrington trained him as an archaeologist. And so Faye ended up working as a foreman for the CCC because he was well versed in the region at the time period. So this first video that we're going to see, first part of this, this was done, this sat in my office, had been sitting at Lost City Museum since I'm going to go back to this, since about 1976, 77. So we had it for about 50 years. And it was in it's a reel of film that was labeled The Lost City. And we all thought that it was the film The Lost City that had been done for the pageant in the 1920s that had the backing of, it was either a Rockefeller or a Vanderbilt that put the money up for it. And I think it was a Rockefeller. But that footage, so we had that digitized thanks to one of our docents, Mr. Jim Riley. And when we watched it, we were quite surprised. It's actually more of a CCC film than anything, but it's still, we were very happy to have it. So here's the first part. It's broken up into two. So here's the first bit. So back during this, as you'll see in this first little bit, Harrington would bring folks out to the site as well. So he'll be pointing out things on the Pueblo, which would have been pretty cool to see. It was said though, Harrington also had just an eye for finding these pueblos, knowing which dune was an actual site versus just being an actual dune. So you can see the handprints down or fingerprints down here on the bottom. So this is Harrington, like I said, showing some of the pueblos. And if you watch in the background too of this one, you'll see a little dog, little cocker spaniel go running past as well. But these right here, these couple of photos are more of the CCC excavations. And again, you can see how deep down a lot of these were going. Pretty incredible the amount of dirt that they moved. This is just showing House 72, this CCC enrollee McDonald, and then James Oken, who, if you hadn't told me these were two different names, these two look like the same person, or at the very least twins. But I don't think they're related. But he's Oken here is actually cataloging a lot of the artifacts there at the temporary Lost City Museum. So this was the field house and the temporary museum, showing this as well. Like I said, it was a single room. But with the sheer amount of material coming out, you're going to end up needing a bigger museum, which we'll talk about here in just a second. This is Faye Perkins out by the pueblos from the Lost City Pageant, and so showing how they're starting to deteriorate just a bit. So here's the second part of the film, and this is Harrington and Willis Evans doing some excavation, and then also some photography as well. So this is the Pageant site again. So the pueblos that were being built for that 1925, 26, the pageants. And I would still love to know what he's chiseling. All right. So with those excavations out at Pueblo Grande de Nevada and the sheer number of artifacts that were coming from those excavations, they really needed a place bigger than that single one room temporary museum that was out at the site, and also somewhere that's a little more accessible. So that led to the building of the Boulder Dam Park Museum, which was the original name of the Lost City Museum. So they broke ground on the museum on December 12th, 1934. They handmade roughly 70,000 adobe bricks. Those are all bricks behind them as far as the eye can see. You can see them making them here, and just rows and rows and rows of bricks. This museum, like I said, broke ground in December of 34. It opened to the public in mid 1935. So roughly 7-8 months before it opened to the public. Initially, the museum was part of the federal system, was part of the National Park Service and Lake Mead, and until roughly 1950. And then the artifacts that were there in the museum at that point, when it switched from federal to briefly county, and then it went to state, and it's currently a state institution. But all the artifacts prior to that were there during the federal control were removed from the museum and sent elsewhere. So everything that's in the museum today is pretty much been donated, though we do have one exhibit finally of artifacts from Pueblo Grande de Nevada, since we're named the Lost City Museum, but we didn't really have anything from those excavations. So it became a state institution 1953. The pueblos in the back were built in 35 as well. And this person right here, that's Governor Scrugham when the museum was built. And so another view of the pueblos. And then now we have the concrete sidewalk and everything as well. And then with the original sign, also, you could see all of the bricks when it was initially built. At some point, it's been completely covered with adobe, so you don't see the individual bricks. But you can see the original sign with Boulder Dam Park Museum. And then, like I said, 1950s, 53 was when the name changed as well. And this, I believe, is from that time period, with Faye Perkins being named the first curator of Lost City Museum, which they didn't have a director at that point. It was just a curator. And then he only held the position for 2, 3, 4 years before poor health forced him to step down, and his son actually took it over. And that's Mark Harrington standing next to Faye. And then over here, that is Willis next to him as well. So he was there as part of this dedication and, being put in as curator. But during all this time period, you have St. Thomas and the Pageant site, late 1930s, early 40s. Most of that was covered by Lake Mead. And you can actually see in this photo, this is the Pageant site, and you can see the water coming on up. And this, I'm not sure when this photo was taken, looking at the deterioration, probably, several years even after the previous photo, it looks like. And then the Lost City Museum today is, you can see with the adobe facade here, though there is a section around the side where you can still see the brick. And actually, when you're inside and you're in our gift shop, you can see what the original brick looked like as well. So this is was one of my favorite pictures with all the mortars in place. But is at the end, research is still being done. So hopefully we'll have more information coming out of here, for years to come. So, and then just want to thank the folks that are going to be listed here. And that's it. And it stops